Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar from 352 Media Group, the formula for website success, navigation plus call to action equals conversions. Today we're going to have two presenters. Jan Shamasko is going to talk about calls to action, and Daniel Alves is going to talk about navigation. After we talk about those two things, we're going to actually go through some of the websites you've submitted to us and review them based on navigation and calls to action. If you didn't get a chance to give us your URL and you would like us to take a look at your site, that's fine. And just go ahead and put that into the questions tab, and that'll be sent over to us, and we'll get a chance to try and bring that up. Now, I will say we got a really good response in terms of the number of websites that people submitted. So we might not be able to get to every single one, but we're going to do our best to show the ones that really highlight the good and the bad of good navigation and good calls to action. Also, if you have any other questions throughout the webinar, go ahead and submit them in the questions tab, and we will get those answered for you. Either we'll interject or we will wait till the end. But I'm seeing some great URLs already coming in through the questions, so keep them coming, and we'll try to bring up as many of those as we can. So without further ado, we're going to go ahead and get started with Daniel Alves. And Daniel, please take it away.
Thanks, everybody, for coming out and watching our webinar, listening in. The first thing I'm going to be talking about today is navigation. And so we're going to be talking about three different things. The basics, the types of navigation, and I'm going to look at some examples of good navigation, bad, and pretty ugly as well. So, navigation basics. What is a navigation bar, and why is it so important? So, navigation is the backbone of your website. It reflects all the organizational structure on your website and is the container for all the pages on your website as well. It provides a central and universal gateway for users to get around your website. It's pretty much what everybody uses to find what they're looking for, either by searching or through browsing. It also gives the user a sense of orientation. Because websites have so many different pages and different types of content, the navigation is usually one of the few items that stays the same across all the web pages. So it gives the users a sense of orientation and familiarity. They always have something to go back to. It also displays the depth of the website and the scope of the website. So if a website has many links in it, a good navigation structure will allow them to get to all those links, and it will also show them the types of links that are available to them and the types of content that are available to them. And most importantly, the navigation has the ability to drive users to your desired conversion. And that's a very important thing, because a lot of times navigation is just used for informational purposes, and you can actually use it to direct users to specific pages that you want them to see. So navigation is very important, but despite its importance, usually navigation bars are poorly conceived and poorly executed. There was a study by User Interface Engineering that showed people couldn't find the information they were looking for 60% of the time. There was another study by Forrester Research that said 40% of users will never come back to a site when their first visit is negative. So these two statistics are pretty alarming, and it might be okay for your average blog or a hobby site, but for a business, it's simply unacceptable. So how do you ensure that your users are able to quickly and easily find the information they need? This is a great quote by Jeffrey Zeldman. He's a usability guru and very active in design circles. Content precedes design. Design in the absence of content is not design, it's decoration. This is kind of a hard thing for designers to swallow because we like to think of our work as being the most important part of web design, when in fact the content is actually the most important. And the reason for that is that it's what your users are going after. They want to consume content, and they want to be able to get to their desired end in the easiest way and fastest way possible. So the big problem here is that most of the time content is not determined or even thought of before design. So we really need to turn things around and flip it on its head. Thing is, most people want to jump straight into the design because it's fun, it's cool, it's sexy, but nobody wants to talk about content because content is usually boring to talk about. So really, you want to start thinking about content before you even start the web design, and you want to be able to structure it in a way that makes sense and that has a strong hierarchy. So here's another quote, and this is from your users. Don't make me think and get out of my way. And this is a basic tenet of user-focused or user-centered design. You want to think about your users. You want to make sure that they're taken care of and that they're able to accomplish what they came to accomplish in the easiest way possible. So the first thing to accomplishing that is understanding your audience. You want to know the types of people that you're catering to. You want to know if your audience is elderly, highly educated, or not. If they're going to be kids, if they're going to be employed or unemployed. These are all things you're going to want to consider when you're organizing your content and coming up with a navigation structure. The next principle is that people take the first available solution. There was a term coined by Herbert Simon. He was an influential social scientist in the mid-20th century. The word was satisficing, and it was a combination of satisfy with suffice. And an example of this is that a mouse in a maze will with several smelly food options, will end up at the easiest food item to be found, even if it's substantially less appetizing than one that is harder to reach. So this is something that we can take advantage of. You want to present, you want the easiest solution for the user to be the solution that you want them to find. When you're forming your navigation, you really want to consider your calls to actions and incorporate those into the navigation so that your users, when they're browsing through the navigation, they're able to come to the pages that you want them to see. And that basically sums up this post, the usability equals conversions, because when you're giving your users the options that they want, and when they match up with the options that you're giving them, then you're going to have users that are happy to be on your website and going to the pages that you want them to get to, and optimally getting to the calls to action, which Jan is going to be speaking about next. The next tenet is to not overwhelm your users. And I'm going to be going into a bit more of this later in the site examples that I give. You basically don't want to give your users too many options because people are through studies, they've been found that the less options that you give people, the more chance that they will actually choose one of those options. Obviously, you don't want to limit them, but you want to be able to organize all of your links and different routes for people to go to in a highly usable and hierarchical way. And usually that's around 5 to 7 links per navigation section. And I'll show you some more examples of that later. Another thing to remember is to be focused, concise, and to use familiar words. So for example, your contact page should probably just be simply "contact us," and not use phrases like "get in touch" or "let's talk." Just stick to "contact us." It's what people are used to, and they'll gravitate towards that much more quickly than going to a "let's talk" button or link. Another example is to instead of saying "in the news" or "latest news," just give simply "news." People are pretty familiar with that, and it's sufficient to have people to go to that. Another thing that's not really commonly used is to have action links on the right. So, for instance, a home link in your navigation bar would most likely go on the left-hand side, and action links such as "contact us" or "buy now" should go on the right-hand side of a navigation bar. And the reason for that is that people read from left to right, and they associate actions with that movement from left to right. So, and the contrary to that is that movements to the left are considered backwards. So the home link is usually, once you jump into a website, the home link is usually considered backwards. So putting that on the left-hand side makes sense as well. So now we're going to jump into the navigation types. First type is the top horizontal bar. And keep in mind that these aren't all the navigation options, but these are the most popular ones. The next one that we're going to talk about is a sidebar. And then a search element. And then finally the footer navigation. So let's jump into the top horizontal bar. And this is the one that's most common and most popular. It's what you see pretty much on every website. The advantage to this is that first of all, it's familiar, so people know exactly how to use them. Also, it limits. Well, this is kind of its benefit and its downfall is that it's limited by width. So you can only put a certain number of links in that top navigation bar. So in this example, we have 7 links at the top, and there's room for an extra 1 or 2 on the right-hand side. But the 7 links is a good number. Like I said, 5 to 7 is a good number, and the reason for that is that most people have the ability to retain 5 to 7 items in their memory, and also to be able to glance at them and pick something relatively easily. Once you start increasing the number of links that people have to choose between, they start to lose track, and it's not as easy. It takes a little bit more time for people to get to the pages they want. A disadvantage of this type of navigation is that it becomes less effective for complex sites, and I'll show you an example of that in the next slide. Another problem with this type of navigation is that it's not so great for mobile users, especially phones. With tablets, it's not so bad, but with phones, being able to see all of those links, they usually get scrunched down pretty tight, and it's hard to actually click on them with fingers. And lastly, if there are sub-items, you want to show some indication of those sub-items. And in this Netflix example, you can see that Watch Instantly has sub-items, but for instance, Instant Queue does not have any sub-items. So you want to give that cue to your users so that they know there's sub-items within that navigation element. And again, keep it to 5 to 7 links. The next type of navigation is a sidebar. And some websites use this as their primary means of navigation, but most actually use it as a secondary means of navigation to support a top navigation bar. And the example that you can see in the top right is Amazon. And they've been using that sidebar for a really long time, probably since its inception. But it's really good for organizing complex navigations and lots of links because it's not constrained by width. You can go vertically as far as you want, and you can still have all of those items accessible for the user. And the example on the bottom shows sidebar navigation as part of the web design, but not as the top-level navigation. The image is cut off at the top, but it does have a top-level navigation as well. And the sidebar in this example would be used to show secondary links that you want users to see that aren't included in the top navigation. And another thing, too, to keep in mind is that it works better on the left. Usability studies have shown that if you put a sidebar on the right-hand side for navigation, people are less familiar with it and they move a little bit slower, so it's better to keep it on the left. The next element is the search bar. Now, you should never, well, first of all, users are increasingly demanding search bars, so I would suggest using them whenever possible, but it's mostly usable for websites with lots and lots of content, because a lot of times you can't keep everything in a navigation bar. So the search bar gives people access to everything on your website from one little user interface. And it satisfies users who know exactly what they're looking for, because they can just type in their search and get directly there. The trick about search bars is that a lot of times people use them as a crutch for poor navigation. So they just figure, oh, well, if my navigation bar is not very good, people can just find what they need through the search bar. So don't use that as a crutch. Use it as an additional strategy, but not as your primary one. Another thing to keep in mind is to use suggestions. So you can see in the bottom right-hand, that's actually from Etsy as well. So when you start typing in the word necklace, you're given suggestions, and that just helps users find exactly what they're looking for. And the last type, finally, is footer navigation. And this type of navigation is mostly used to support links that might not fit into other parts of the website. And it gives you a little bit more room and more freedom to provide helpful links in a less formal fashion. So it's a good place to put links that don't fit anywhere else. And often users will go to footers to find anything that they're looking for that they can't find elsewhere. So let's jump into the site examples. These aren't site examples that were generated by you all, but site examples that I found on the website or on the internet to illustrate some of the things that I talked about. So let's look at the good first. First example that we have is Apple. And Apple this is kind of a cheat here, because everybody uses Apple as the gold standard of web design. But there are several things that we can learn from it. First of all, the top-level navigation, even though this is a very large company with lots of products and lots of pages on their website, they're able to distill everything into the 7 links that are at the top of the page. And then there's also the search bar as well that's really handy. And then this is actually an inner page, so you can see that there's a sub-navigation bar right below the top-level navigation bar, and to provide those secondary links. So instead of using a sidebar here, they're just using another top navigation bar. Another thing that's worth noting too is the Buy Now button on the right of the sub-navigation bar, and that's simply a clever way to include a call to action in the navigation bar without it being obtrusive. The next one is Lowe's, and this is a good example of a super nav. And basically, a super nav is a very large drop-down with lots of options in it. And these are popular on very large websites as well. Not very. It wouldn't be advisable to use this for a small business, but for websites that have very large, a large list of links and lots of pages, then it's really helpful. And they use a combination of a sidebar and the top bar. And you also see that they have thumbnails for the most popular and seasonal links. So that provides a little shortcut for their users. People don't have to actually read the links. They can just look at the images and jump right in. It saves users time and makes it a little bit easier for them. Another thing to notice too is that they have a very large search bar in the top right that's really handy. And the images are kind of are reflective of going into a Lowe's store and browsing the aisles and zeroing in on the specific products that you want to get to. The next one that is still in the good category is Sony, and this is an example of a very simple navigation. So as opposed to Lowe's, these guys take a little bit of a simpler approach, but you can still see that the top-level items make sense, and for somebody that is looking for a Sony product or just information, it's very easy to get to all the pages. And then also notice that the links that have sub-level items have a plus sign, and the links that don't just have an arrow to the right. And that just indicates that you're getting to a page that you can actually click on. It's not just a category. Now let's talk about some bad examples. The first one is CNN, and granted, they do have to cover an entire planet of news, but they do have 16 links in their top-level navigation, which is very hard for the users to read. There's just too many links, and in order to find what you need, you really have to scan over that navigation bar several times before you actually find what you need. And cramming this many links into the full width of the website just basically hinders readability and forces a small font size in the navigation. Another example, and this is the contrast from the Lowe's website, is the Home Depot. This navigation on the sidebar is just very cumbersome because the links are not in the sub level aren't broken out into a hierarchy. And another thing too is that there's just no value provided in this navigation bar. Really what the users are going to this navigation bar are to browse, and it's not really providing a browsing experience like you would see in a store. Like Lowe's, for instance, they had the thumbnails of the different categories and different departments to give a visual representation. So this one would really be helped out by just providing some kind of visual reference. Now let's look at the ugly. The first example is Samsung, and I was actually surprised by this one because they're a very large company. But the thing that really jumped out to me was the recently viewed section, the lower portion of the subnav. This actually on their live website didn't do anything. So first of all, it has functionality that doesn't work, which is a big no-no for navigation. You want everything to work, and you want it to make sense. Another thing that's bad about this one is that the sub-level items don't actually have an indication that it's a sub-level. So for instance, right now we're in the products category. The other categories don't have, they don't have sub-level items. The products is the only one that does. So there should be some indication that there's a sub-level there. Another thing too is that the links aren't really organized in a straightforward way. It's kind of hard to navigate this site in general. But they do have a nice navigation below it, where you see latest in TV and video, and mobile and photo, computing and home appliances. That bottom section works a lot better. If you go to their live site, you can see what I'm talking about. The next one, and this one's really bad, is vitamin water. On this one, the biggest thing for me is that the top level navigation items don't really make any sense. The only one that does is products. That one is straightforward. Okay, we're jumping into the products that they have. But the other three items, Uncapped, My Playlist, Vitamin Angels, for an average user to come to this website, it doesn't really mean anything. We don't know what's going to be beyond those links, and there's nothing really indicating any reason for us to do that. So this one, just straight off the bat, doesn't provide any semantic or straightforward way to get to the rest of the content on the site. And finally, this is a small business that has some issues on this design. If I could show you the live site, you'd be even more confused. But the navigation is actually the eggs that are in the middle of the screen. You have to hover over each one of the eggs to find out which item you're going to be going to. And surprisingly, the links at the top, lunch and dinner, aren't actually links. That's just purely informational, so you can't actually click on that. So this one just is an example of somebody trying to be creative, and it doesn't really make any sense. And so in conclusion, these are the basic ideas that you want to stick to. Simplicity rules, so try to keep your navigation as simple as possible. Be familiar. Try to include links that make sense and that anybody would be able to understand. Don't give any quirky or proprietary links in your top-level navigation, because it's just going to confuse users and it's not welcoming to people that aren't familiar with your brand. The next one is let users fail. You never want to give a user a dead end. If somebody is going to a page that they didn't intend to, always give them the option to back up or proceed to another page that is interesting to them. The next one is don't try to reinvent the wheel. So this goes back to the simplicity rules. Don't try to come up with some fancy navigation strategy. Just stick to the basics and spend your time being creative in other areas of the website. The last one is put yourself in your user's shoes, and this goes back to the user-centered design. Don't always think about your users. Try to get second opinions when you're coming up with your site architecture, your information architecture, because a lot of times the content on your site is familiar to you, but it's not familiar to your users. So you always want to take that naive layperson's approach to evaluating your content and your navigation, so that it's straightforward and anybody can understand it. And now I'm going to hand it over to Jan, who's going to talk about call to actions.
Great. Thanks, Daniel. That's some fantastic info. So I'm Jan Shimashko. I'm the Director of Sales and Marketing here for our Small Business Division, Core Web Solutions, and I'm going to talk a little bit about calls to action. So every website has a purpose, and for businesses, that's typically going to be something where you're either selling a product, you're generating leads, providing an information resource, or you're really just selling the business as a professional business with what you have for your online presence. Now, having an exceptionally designed website and a solid navigation is key, which of course Daniel has just demonstrated, but there is the additional critical aspect of having clear and concise calls to action. So one thing I wanted to mention, we're going to be sending a poll here in a minute while I'm going through the rest of this. So if everybody could take a quick look at that. So a call to action. So what is a call to action? It's a way to solicit an action from a visitor on a website. So that means purchase a product, fill out a contact form, download a demo, make an appointment, sign up for a service, things like that. You can think of it as the one or maybe two or three most critical things that you want a visitor to do when they're on your site. It's not an easy thing to do, but I definitely challenge you guys as an exercise to come up with at least one or two and see if you're actually doing that on your website right now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through 7 different things to consider when creating calls to action for your website. So the first one is language. Now, it's critical to be using bold, confident, and commanding words. You want to use things like now, immediately, expires April 1st. You want to have active words like call, buy, sign up, download, things like that. So one way or another, you want to be engaging people with this language and encouraging them to take an action just with the actual words themselves, not just the graphics. So the next piece then is the size. So in general, we think of things that are more prominent on web pages and that are larger as being more important. So you can see here the setup a demo for this particular site is huge. Now it's still important for them to capture students through their website, so they do have a small thing just below that, and then there are other subtle buttons there for people to be clicking on. So if you're going to be having multiple calls to action on the website, then you want to size them accordingly and not just create 6 buttons that are all the same color and end up needing an actual example there. Just like Daniel was saying, the search is going to be something that's very important for a lot of websites, so that's very prominent. To subscribe, this is actually a blog, so for people to subscribe to it, that's very important. So you have another one, a third call to action, but that's a little more subtle and speaks to people getting information and help for the site. So that does a great job of having multiple calls to action, but not muddying things up. So the next one is positioning. So our eyes tend to gravitate towards corner elements of the page. We look in kind of a Z pattern. So one thing that's going to be very smart to do, of course, is to put calls to action there. So you can see that first example is actually a cosmetic dentist. So in the top right-hand corner, it's encouraging people to see before and after photos. Of course, that's then going to showcase what the dentist does and hopefully encourage people to either reach out via clicking on another call to action that's on their various pages to make an appointment or just pick up the phone and call. So another element to think about is in these corners to do something kind of snazzy, to do something where it's like the call to action is floating above that corner, or something that's wrapping out from the side, just to add a little extra visual flair to it. And then centering the call to action actually is something that's really good, as long as you don't have a lot of visual clutter that's around it. You can see in that bottom screen cap there for Intel, it's very obvious what it is that they want you to do on their main site. The next element then is scarcity. So you don't want to have too many calls to action. I mentioned that in the beginning. You want to think of somewhere between maybe 1 to 3 items that are critical to what your visitors are doing on your website. And then when you have more than one, you want them to be organized in a bit of a hierarchy, and then you can use all of the various things that I've been talking about to subtly change them so that one is given a bit more prominence over another. Contrast. Using contrasting colors is probably the most important aspect of calls to action. It doesn't necessarily matter if they're huge or small or where exactly they're located if they're not obvious. And the #1 way that we can do that is just visually having something that stands out, that's an orange or a yellow color, or some other contrast. There's an example of it here, but with a very dark color, a black or something on a much lighter background. Or you can add a texture. You can see in the middle there that has what they call kind of an aqua feel to it, and the rest of the site is more two-dimensional. So again, changing the colors for a secondary call to action. You can see at the top there are 2 very important calls to action, but they're separated, so it's obvious. And using negative space, white space, is something that's also going to give a lot of prominence to the particular call to action. Consistency. So once you have a good call to action on your home page, people aren't necessarily always going to click on that. If there is great navigation, like Daniel's been talking about, they're probably going to dig into the site a little bit more and not take that initial action until a later point when their interest has been piqued. So you need to make sure those calls to actions also exist on pages within the site. So don't be afraid to include these calls to actions on all of your additional pages. Don't have to be in the same place, but they do need to be present in one fashion or another. The other thing to consider is what happens next. You want to make sure that it's very easy for people to take whatever that next action is. For us, on our website, our call to action is going to be one of two things, either to learn more about what we do or to reach out and fill out a form. So we want to make it pretty easy. We don't want to have all kinds of unnecessary steps of asking 55 different qualifying questions, or people are probably going to just abandon the form and go somewhere else. So as a lot of marketers will do, they love capturing information and building a profile of their particular users. So we need to resist the urge to capture too much information, just what's necessary. During a purchasing process, people are probably going to be willing to give up a lot more information than when you're just inquiring for a quote or something like that. So it's going to be very different across businesses, but it's something that you really need to consider once you've come up with this quality call to action or actions. So in conclusion, an effective call to action requires a lot of thoughtfulness. So all of these things need to be considered in one way, shape, or form, because you're bringing together a combination of usability, design, and copywriting, and those things don't all work together in our minds, being left-brained or right-brained. So there really is no one right or wrong way. What you're going to need to do is try a bunch of different things, but the one thing that is undeniable is there has to be some sort of call to action. Otherwise, people are not going to do what you'd like to do on your website consistently to lead to conversions. So what I'd like to do then now is move into the website critique portion and bring up some of the websites that we've received beforehand and go through our various thoughts. So let's see here.
And as Jan's bringing that up, I'm going to go ahead and launch a second poll here. We asked about what you think about calls to action, but we'd like to know what you think about your own site's navigation, how you'd rate it, and then I'll share the results from both of these polls up on the screen as we're toggling in between sites. Also, if you have any comments on the sites that we're bringing up as we're looking at them, please go ahead and post them in the comments, and we will share them with you as well. So I'll go ahead and close the poll here now, and we'll bring up the first website.
All right, so this is a great example of a site that actually just doesn't really have a call to action, not in terms of something that you can click on and do anything. You've got in the top right-hand corner, I mean, first of all, the design is pretty good, the navigation is pretty good, but it doesn't really compel you to do much. So in that top right-hand corner, the "and more," that would be a great place to include a link so that you can find out what is more. Even the "call us first," if that were in the center there, if that were in maybe that yellow goldish color or the red, just to bring that out a little bit and have that take you to the Contact Us page that has contact information for people to reach out. So there's some very subtle things that can be done to bring out some call to action on here that I'm sure would make a big difference in people reaching out to Register's Art. Sorry. Daniel, do you have
yeah, so the navigation on this one is actually pretty good. The only suggestions I would have is to maybe consolidate them a little bit. I think there's 9 items on there right now, so to bring it back down to closer to 7 would be a good idea. Some ideas there would be maybe to include custom rugs, underneath products or services instead of its own item. And also, the last thing I would say is that the education link is a little, I guess for an average user, they're not really sure what they would be going to in terms of education. So if there was a more straightforward way to communicate that, it would probably be a good idea to revise the language there.
All right, so let's look at another site here. Now this does have some very obvious calls to action. The first one there in the right-hand corner of the header does a good job of contrasting, but read more doesn't really inspire a whole lot. Maybe find out more or learn more. In addition to that, there really isn't a whole lot more that I'm really compelled to do. I would think maybe that login towards the bottom could be more prominent for new members. I see in the top right-hand corner there, the new member is kind of grayed out. I don't know, but I would imagine that new members are important, and so you'd want to make that very obvious for the people that come to the site. But it definitely has a call to action that is very obvious, so that's definitely a plus.
Yeah, as far as navigation goes, this one does have two navigation bars. There's one at the top and one right below the slideshow. And that presents a little bit of a challenge because the users aren't really sure which one they need to go to find the information they need. So maybe consider combining those into one solid navigation would be a good idea. There is a sub level when you hover over these secondary the secondary navigation bar, and I guess that definitely provides a whole host of links to go to, and there's also little indications of the secure pages, which is pretty helpful. So that just gives users a little bit more trust. So I'm assuming these will actually go to secure pages. But otherwise, I would just probably consider summing up the titles a little bit better and including them in one bar. And there's a whole host of suggestions that we can make, but we're going to try to keep them focused to the call to actions and the navigation.
So this is another example, like the first site, where there really isn't a call to action. Besides, in the top right-hand corner there, you've got the phone number, which is good because from just our psychology, having used the web for quite some time, we look for phone numbers and contact us links in the top right-hand corner. So it's good that they're following that convention, but I would definitely like to see some kind of button to request a quote, or even something just to learn more about the products. Daniel can talk a little bit about the navigation there, but there's nothing really prominent that speaks to the visitor to take any kind of action.
Yeah, Jan's absolutely correct there. My suggestion for the navigation would be similar to the other ones, that there's just too many items in the main navigation. I think just a quick count, there's probably 10 in this navigation bar. So it'd probably be a good idea to consolidate those and categorize the like ones together so that users don't have to read through such a long list to get to the pages. Let's see what else. As far as like the name of the links, those seem to be pretty good. So semantically, it makes sense, and I think an average person would be able to understand those. So that's good. I guess the top navigation is a mirror of the left-hand side navigation. My suggestion there would be, since you have that white space on the right-hand side, to just give each of those links in the top bar a little bit more room on either side, which would improve the legibility, because right now they're all squished up right next to each other, and that presents a little bit of a readability issue.
So this is a good example of a site that's really doing some things right from my perspective with the calls to action. You see the navigation itself is very bright, so that's calling that out specifically as being very important for the visitors. But then on the right-hand side there, the Take a Pledge Now, that's very obvious. They're using some graphics that are contrasting very well with the rest of the site, the blues. And then the newsletter piece is, again, something that looks like it's very important for them. It's very obvious. It's all above the fold, and it draws your eye down to do these things now. I don't know if there are other things that are more important that they would like to potentially showcase. That might be something to think about because that area is very much drawing attention. So if there's anything else that is more important, that would be the place to put it. So I really like the way that this is put together and how those calls to action are standing out very, very strong and encouraging you to take the pledge. You know, not just it's an action. Like actually getting something from it. You know, the subtle things with the language actually make a big difference.
Yeah, this is a great design, and it does have a strong navigation element. There's 5 links in there, which is pretty much ideal. It's not too much for people to wade through to get to the places they need to get. The only suggestion that I might have would be to change the wording of the Better Schools and Brighter Futures because it's kind of vague as to what's going to be behind those pages. So something that is more universal and speaks to what those pages are about would be better. Maybe like our mission or what we do, something like that might be more familiar to users. But otherwise, this is a great example of a well-done site.
We've got a few more sites we were hoping to get to, but frankly, there were quite a lot of them that you guys sent in that we weren't going to be able to get to as well. So what I think we're going to do is try to email those of you that did share your site with us back with a couple of comments that hopefully will help you in making some small changes that can hopefully have a big impact for you. Also, we're going to go ahead and have the recorded version of this webinar available on our blog at 352media.com/blog. So if you missed anything in the beginning or wanted to share it with anyone else, you can certainly do that. And that should be it. So thank you very much for attending today, and we hope to see you at a future webinar.